I didn't come back for love. I came back so they can't lie anymore. I was 11 when my mother, Margaret Thompson, leaned across the front seat of our station wagon and said, "Just for the summer, honey. 3 months tops." My father, Harold, didn't say anything. He kept his eyes on the gravel road that curved like a scar into the Kentucky hills. His jaw was tight, his hands too steady on the wheel. They dropped me off in front of a farmhouse that looked like it hadn't been painted since the 1960s. 2 stories, brown roof, porch swing, crooked on one side. It smelled like cedar sap and old machines. I remember the wind pulling at my coat, the duffel bag cutting into my shoulder, and the way no one looked me in the eye when the front door opened. George Thompson. My grandfather stood in the doorway, and a flannel shirt sleeves rolled, one hand gripping the frame like he didn't trust the wind either. He wasn't tall, but he seemed solid, as if the house might fall before he would. He nodded once and said, "Well, you'd better come in." Margaret kissed the top of my head without touching it. Harold gave a flat wave. I turned, expecting at least one backward glance. There was none. The wagon pulled away, tires crunching until the sound disappeared. Inside the house creaked like it had lungs. The living room was dim, filled with books stacked under furniture legs to balance the tilt. The walls were lined with shelves, dusty frames, and a cuckoo clock that coughed every hour instead of chiming. George didn't offer hugs. He pointed to the staircase and said, "Your room's upstairs. It's the one with the old radio." It wasn't much of a room, just a cot, a threadbare rug, and a window that looked out over fields so flat they felt like sky. But on the nightstand sat a flashlight and a small folded towel. Someone had thought ahead. I held that flashlight like a hand. That first night, I lay in bed with my shoes still on. I kept imagining they'd knock on the door, apologize, say there was a mistake, that they'd turned around at the last gas station. I stared out the window so long the moon slid across the glass like a whisper, but no lights came down the drive. No voices called my name. By morning, the towel was still folded. The house was quiet except for a radio in the kitchen playing old jazz through static. George stood at the stove flipping pancakes with mechanical focus. He didn't ask if I'd slept well. He just set a plate in front of me and said, "Eat." I didn't ask when they were coming back. I couldn't. What would have hurt more, hearing soon or hearing nothing at all? George didn't ask questions, and I learned not to offer answers. Each morning he rose before the sun, the clatter of pans and hiss of the percolator echoing through the walls like clockwork. I followed the scent of burnt coffee into the kitchen, where he moved with the same precision I'd later see in his hands when he fixed a broken fuse or rebuilt an old carburetor. Breakfast was toast, always slightly burned at the edges. Sometimes he'd leave out 2 slices, one near black, one golden, and I never knew if it was by accident or design. I always took the burnt one. He never sat across from me. He stood at the sink, sipping from a chipped mug that read, "Thompson Lumber 1974," as if he'd already eaten elsewhere. The only sounds were the ticking of the wall clock and the occasional creak of the floorboards adjusting to the day. He didn't treat me like a guest, but he didn't treat me like an inconvenience either. In the afternoons, I wandered the yard, stretched into wheat-colored fields bordered by rusted fences and tractor ruts. There was a shed behind the barn, half workshop, half graveyard of forgotten machines. George spent hours there. Sleeves rolled, grease painting his forearms, an old transistor radio murmuring baseball scores in the corner. One day, I lingered by the door too long. He looked up, then down at the socket wrench in his hand. "Want to try?" he asked. I didn't answer, just stepped forward. He showed me how to loosen the bolt, how to hold steady. My hands were too small. I dropped the wrench twice, but he didn't flinch or sigh. He waited. When the bolt finally turned, he smiled. Just once, but it was the kind of smile that felt earned. We didn't speak of it afterward. He just handed me a cloth to wipe the grease and returned to work. Evenings were silent. Dinner was simple: boiled potatoes, beans, the occasional meatloaf reheated from a frozen tray. We ate at the table like coworkers after a long shift. The radio played softly in the background, big band tunes or farm reports. At night, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling's cracks like constellations. Sometimes I'd trace words in my mind, sentences I would say if they ever came back. I missed you. Did you miss me? Did you know I stayed quiet to be easier to forget? But I never said them aloud. Not to George, not to anyone, cow system, anyone. Instead, I began to leave small notes on the workshop bench, just scribbles grease cap loose or saw blade slipping. He never mentioned them, but the next day they'd be fixed. He didn't praise. He didn't scold, but the shed door was never locked again. It was late October when I opened the wrong drawer. I'd been looking for masking tape in the old oak desk tucked beside the workshop's back wall. Most of the drawers held what you'd expect. Nuts, nails, folded shop towels, a flashlight that never worked, but one stuck on the pull. I jiggled it loose and out slid a manila folder with my name written across the top in a pen I recognized as George's. I froze. Inside, a court document from 2003 stamped in black ink and clipped neatly at the corner. Voluntary termination of parental rights. Margaret and Harold Thompson. The air shifted. The workshop, always warm with the smell of sawdust and grease, suddenly felt sterile distant. My hands trembled. I read it again. My name, their signatures, the date. I did the math. I'd been barely 14. No visitation rights, no appeal, no plans for reunification, just closure. I sat on the stool and held the folder in my lap like it might catch fire. I waited for the part of me that still hoped the one that still wrote sentences in the dark rehearsed them like prayers to fight back. But it didn't. I didn't cry. Not right then. I folded the paper neatly, slid it back in place, and closed the drawer. George had never told me not once, and yet he'd saved the paper, tucked it where I might eventually find it. I didn't ask him why. I was afraid he'd tell me what the court already had. They let you go. That night, he made chili burn the bottom like always. I stirred mine in slow circles, watching the flecks of pepper float. He didn't notice my silence. Or maybe he did, and just knew better than to touch it. After dinner, he pulled a small wooden box from the hall closet. "Found this when I cleaned the barn," he said. Inside was a rusted compass and a pocket knife with the initials GT etched into the side. "Yours if you want it." I nodded, unsure what he was really giving me. The box stayed on my nightstand after that. I never used the knife, but I liked knowing it was there. The next morning, he didn't ask if I'd slept. I didn't ask if he knew I'd seen the file. We went about our routine, feeding the chickens, checking the fencing near the pasture, but something had shifted. He handed me a wrench mid-repair and our fingers brushed. For a second, I thought he might say something. Instead, he cleared his throat and said, "You'll need your own set soon." That was his way. No apologies, no promises, just space to stay and tools to build with. That night, I added a new sentence to the list I kept in my head. If they come back, don't ask why they left. Ask why they stayed gone. I didn't think of it as engineering at first. I just wanted to fix things that didn't work the way they should. A rusty hinge, a broken latch, the busted heater in the barn that coughed more than it warmed. George noticed. He didn't say it, but he started leaving things half-repaired, wire spools out of place, diagrams, half-drawn screws just loose enough. I took the bait every time. When I was 16, I read a magazine article about a wheelchair that folded into a backpack. The idea stuck. Ours hadn't worked right since the war, George said. I wanted to build something he wouldn't have to fight with. I sketched late into the night, arms sore from welding practice and YouTube tutorials on an old laptop that wheezed like it had asthma. One weekend, I told him I needed aluminum tubing thin but strong. I'd already checked the prices online. He didn't say anything, just disappeared into town and came back empty-handed, except for an envelope with a receipt and $472 in change. I didn't ask what he sold, but the next time I went out to the shed, the old Chevy was gone from the back lot. The one with the cracked windshield and the faded bumper sticker that said, "Farmers don't quit." He said it needed too many repairs. I never believed him. The prototype took 8 months. It was clunky ugly, but it folded and it rolled. I submitted it to the Kentucky Young Inventors Fair with a 3-page essay and a grainy demo video George recorded holding the camera like it might bite him. I won third place. The judge called it practical but uninspired. But that didn't matter. What mattered was the letter that arrived 2 weeks later and offered to join a state-sponsored STEM cohort with a partial scholarship to a public university if I could keep my grades up. George didn't say congratulations. He just handed me a box of assorted screws and said, "You'll need these." At graduation, the gym was packed. Families brought balloons, flowers noise. My friends took photos in dresses and ties. I wore jeans and the only blouse that didn't have grease on the cuffs. George sat in the back row, clean-shaven for the first time in a year. He didn't wave, but when I crossed the stage, I heard one pair of hands clap longer than the rest. Afterward, I found him leaning against the truck he'd borrowed from the neighbor. He handed me a sandwich wrapped in wax paper and said, "Figured you'd be hungry." We drove home with the windows down. The sky was clear, the air soft. He didn't say he was proud. He didn't need to. On my 25th birthday, George made pancakes from scratch. The kitchen smelled like brown butter and burnt edges. A record played in the background, Benny Goodman's Soft and Crackling. He set a wrapped box on the table beside my coffee mug. No ribbon, just wax paper folded neat. Inside was a brass pocket watch, heavy cold. The back was engraved with 2 words, "Move forward." I traced them with my thumb. The cover opened with a click. The hands didn't tick, but the face was clean white and still. I didn't understand what made it special, but I didn't say that. I only asked yours. He nodded. And now it's yours. He didn't explain more. Just pushed the rest of the pancakes onto my plate and told me to eat before they got stiff. I wore the watch around my neck that day, tucked under my shirt like it needed to be close to something warm. That night, we watched the sunset from the back porch. He lit his pipe. I told him about a new project at work, some modular mobility device they wanted me to lead. He listened without interrupting. Then he said, "About time someone saw what you can build." It was the last thing he ever said to me. The next morning, the kitchen was silent. No smell of coffee, no hum of radio. His boots were by the door laces still tied. I found him in his bedroom lying on top of the quilt he'd had since I was a kid. One hand rested over his chest, the other open, like he'd meant to reach for something. I touched his arm. Cold. I don't remember calling the ambulance or the neighbors who came to stand in the doorway, hats pressed to chests, offering condolences. They didn't know how to speak. What I do remember is sitting at the edge of the porch watch, clutched in my fist, listening to the wind rustle through the trees. He'd been the only one who stayed, the only one who never asked me to be someone else or someone easier to leave. The house echoed that week. Every corner felt too quiet. The barn light flickered even when I replaced the bulb. I half expected him to come through the door muttering about voltage or bad wiring. But he didn't. I hung the watch on a nail above the sink. It didn't tick, but I looked at it every morning like it might. The church pews filled slowly that morning. Farmers in pressed flannel, retired engineers in faded ties. Women who'd baked casseroles in silence for years. No flowers. George never liked the fuss. I sat in the second row just behind the casket, my hands folded in my lap like I was holding something delicate I didn't want to drop. Halfway through the service, the door opened behind me. I turned instinct more than curiosity. Margaret and Harold. I hadn't seen their faces in 14 years, but somehow I knew them before I knew them. The way my mother's scarf was knotted just so. The way my father's expression flickered between patience and calculation. They walked down the center aisle like they belonged there. Margaret's heels clicked. Harold nodded at a few strangers. They slid into the front pew like nothing had happened, like this was just another chapter in a story they were still writing. After the final hymn, Margaret turned and met my eyes. She stood and opened her arms. "Oh, Effie," she whispered, folding me into a hug before I could move. "You've grown so much. I've missed you." I didn't return the gesture. My arm stayed at my side, stiff as fence posts. She smelled like lavender and money. Harold offered a handshake, then pulled me close for a one-armed embrace. I didn't return. I didn't know you were coming, I said flatly. Margaret's eyes shimmered. Of course we came. We were devastated when we heard. George meant so much to us. I didn't say what I wanted to, that George never spoke their names, not once. Outside in the shade of the maples, they led me toward the parking lot, away from the neighbors offering potato salad and polite memories. We should catch up, Margaret said. Talk about everything George left behind. There it was. I stopped walking. What exactly are you here for? I asked. Harold's smile was tight. To help. It's a lot to manage. The farm, the house, the assets. You're young. You shouldn't have to do this alone. Margaret placed a manicured hand on my arm. We want to be a family again, she said softly. It's what George would have wanted. I pulled away. You signed me away, I said. I wasn't a secret. I was a burden. You didn't lose me. You left me. Margaret's smile twitched. That's not fair, Effie. No, I said it's not. Harold stepped forward, voice calm. Don't let bitterness get in the way of practicality. He left a lot behind. It affects all of us. I looked at them, well-dressed, rehearsed, already thinking in dollar signs. He's not even in the ground yet, I said. And you're already circling. They blinked. But I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked back toward the church, toward the people who had shown up long before the money did. The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and fresh printer ink walls lined with degrees. A window behind the desk looked out over the river, the water gray and low. Her name was Susan Carter, late 60s, sharp blazer hair like steel wool pulled into a bun. She didn't smile much. I liked that. Margaret and Harold were already seated when I arrived. Susan didn't offer pleasantries, just motioned for me to sit. This won't take long, she said, opening a folder. I glanced at my parents. Margaret folded her hands neatly in her lap. Harold leaned back like this was routine. Susan cleared her throat. George C. Thompson's estate has been legally transferred in full to Effie A. Thompson, his granddaughter in legal ward. She paused. The room tightened. Margaret broke the silence. That can't be right. George never discussed any of this with us. Susan didn't blink. He didn't need to. You relinquished guardianship in 2009. I have the documents. She pulled out a signed form. Black ink, clear date. Harold's mouth twitched. We were advised to do that at the time for Effie's stability. Susan continued. George's estate includes the farm, 4 parcels of surrounding land, 2 patents in ongoing use, and majority shares in Thompson Solutions Incorporated. Total value just over $92 million. I gripped the chair arms. The number didn't register. I only heard one word, George. Margaret leaned forward, voice warm. Darling, with that kind of responsibility, you'll need guidance. Support. We can help. Susan raised a hand. Mr. Thompson anticipated this. She opened a small black case and pulled out a scanner. May I see the watch? I hesitated, then removed it from my neck and placed it on the desk. Susan opened the back panel, revealing a tiny QR chip beneath the face. She scanned it. A green light blinked. Verified, she said. Harold frowned. What the hell is this? Susan didn't answer him. She turned to me. Your grandfather encrypted the will's activation to the watch biometrically coded to your pulse pattern. No one else can claim the estate. The documentation, witness records, and encryption logs are all in this folder. You are the sole heir, Effie. Margaret stood, her voice cracked. You can't be serious. She's a child. I looked at her. I'm 25. You don't know what you're doing. Harold added. This could ruin you. We'll contest it. Susan met his stare. You're welcome to try, but be advised the watch, the biometric lock, and your prior surrender of parental rights make this airtight. You will lose. Margaret's face paled. She turned to me, eyes wide. Effie, you don't want a war in court, do you? Just talk to us. I stood the watch cool in my hand. You've had 14 years to talk to me, I said. You chose silence. Harold glared. You'll regret this. I walked out before Susan could say another word. The hallway smelled like floor wax and something burnt. Outside, the river moved slow and sure. I held the watch tight, feeling the tick that wasn't there, just the echo of everything George had prepared long before I even knew I'd need it. I returned to the farm by dusk. The gravel crunched beneath the tires of George's old truck. The porch light was on, though I hadn't left it that way. A small thing, but it set something off inside me. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I did a walk through doors, locked nothing out of place, but still the air felt touched, as if someone had stood too long in the center of the kitchen, just staring. The next morning, I found a manila envelope tucked under the front gate. Inside, a formal notice intent to challenge the will filed by Harold and Margaret Thompson, natural parents of Effie A. Thompson on grounds of undue influence and questionable mental competency of deceased party. Below it, a second envelope. No letter, just printed screenshots of my grandfather's last medical visits, highlighted for blood pressure and cognitive decline. They were playing dirty. That same afternoon, they appeared again. A black SUV rolled up the dirt road like a hearse that didn't know when to stop coming. Margaret stepped out, first sunglasses hiding her eyes. Harold followed, phone already in hand. I stood at the edge of the porch, arms crossed. I told you not to come back. Margaret smiled like it hurt. We want to resolve this peacefully. Harold didn't smile. You're not thinking clearly, Effie. This place, this burden, it'll break you. I didn't answer. We've spoken to a few people. Margaret continued. There's press interest. A young woman inherits $90 million and pushes out her dying grandfather's own children. That'll make headlines. I clenched the railing. Harold took a step forward. We're offering you a deal. Sell us partial stake in the land. Keep the house, the watch, whatever else you're sentimental about. In return, we'll drop the challenge. They were offering to buy silence, to rewrite history with a handshake. I looked at the fields behind them, the same ones George and I used to ride horses through at dawn. I could almost hear the rusted bell he rang when it was time for supper. You think this place will ruin me? I said, stepping down from the porch. It raised me. You left? It stayed. Margaret's jaw tightened. You don't have to do this, Effie. You don't have to be alone. I stared at her for a long moment. I was alone, I said. When I waited by the window every birthday, when I brought George cocoa during his chemo and watched him fall asleep mid-sentence. Where were you then? Harold's voice dropped low. You'll regret shutting us out. I opened the gate, then sue me, and I shut it behind them. A week after they left, I found the tin box. It was buried beneath the floorboards of George's study, where the rug had always sat uneven. I'd moved the desk to clean and saw the small iron hook. Just a sliver, but enough. Inside his journals. And on top of them, a letter in his script firm, slanted deliberate. Effie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But if I raised you right then, you're still standing head high. That's all I ever wanted. This land is yours. But I never meant it just for crops or memory. I meant it for something more. I read the rest by the light of the shed lamp, the same bulb we replaced together after the frost that first year. His words spilled out across the pages, diagrams of robotics workshops, cost breakdowns for mobile classrooms, outreach plans to support kids raised like me, discarded, underestimated, hungry for a place to belong. He called it the Thompson Circle. Not a charity. A foundation where kids like me could come build, fail, and build again with dignity. I stayed in the shed till morning, surrounded by blueprints and grit. When the sun rose, I called Susan Carter. She listened quietly, then said, He told me you'd find it. By fall, I'd turned the old equipment barn into the first prototype lab, hired a retired engineer from Lexington, ordered parts in bulk. Susan helped file the nonprofit paperwork. My days filled with voices again, not George's, but the nervous laughter of children assembling their first circuits, blowing fuses, cheering when the lights blinked on. The first girl to finish a project was named Lily, age 11, foster care since 5. She built a robotic arm that poured water into a cup. She asked if she could keep it. I said no. She cried. Then I gave her the soldering iron and said, "Build a better one." She did. Some evenings, I still sit on the porch with the watch around my neck, listening for sounds I know won't come back: the weight of George's boots on the stairs, the scrape of his chair on the kitchen floor. But then I see Lily chasing another student through the field. I see the lights flicker in the lab. I feel the pulse of something more than grief. They called it an inheritance. But what he really left me was a reason. It was near Thanksgiving when they came again. I was sweeping leaves from the porch. The wind carried a bite and the sky hung heavy with gray. I saw the same black SUV approach slower this time, tires crackling over gravel like it didn't want to arrive. Margaret stepped out alone. No sunglasses, no jewelry, just a beige coat and eyes that seemed smaller than I remembered. I didn't move from the steps. "Hi," she said. Silence stretched. "I'm not here to fight," she added. "Just to see." She looked around, eyes scanning the lab, the sign that read, "The Thompson Circle." And the group of kids racing toward the barn with wires in their arms. "I read about it in the papers," she said, voice barely above the wind. "I didn't know you'd actually do something with it." I didn't respond. She stepped forward but stopped at the porch gate, hands clenched tight. "You were always like him, even when you were little." That struck something, but I kept my voice even. "You didn't come to say that." Margaret shook her head. "No, I came to say I'm sorry for everything. We were scared, Effie, and selfish, but mostly scared." A gust lifted the last of the leaves from the ground. She flinched as they swirled around her boots. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she continued. "I know I don't deserve it, but you should know your father's sick pancreatic. It's not going to be long." I nodded once. No words came. She looked at me for a long moment. "You don't have to come. I wouldn't blame you." I watched as she turned back to the car, her steps slower, shoulders hunched like the wind had finally worn through her. The car pulled away without a sound. That night, I sat alone in the shed, the soldering iron still warm in my hand. Outside, the wind howled, and inside, the ring on my finger caught the light. Legacy. It didn't need to be loud or final, only true. There's a room above the barn, a narrow wooden loft George once used to store broken tools and spare wire. Now it holds a desk, a kettle, and a window that watches the entire valley. I come here sometimes after the children have gone home, when the wind slips in through the shutters, and the field below breathes soft beneath the moonlight. Tonight, I sat with my journal open, not to write, but to feel the weight of the silence between pages. The ring rested on my desk. I turned it slowly, tracing the word, legacy. George built this with calloused hands and quiet patience. Not for praise, not for revenge, but because he believed in building even when everything else breaks. The past never gave me closure. It didn't hand me apologies or neat endings. And I've stopped expecting them, but it gave me something else, a place to begin. Lily will take over the robotics program next year. She's training 2 others to mentor the incoming class. I see pieces of myself in them, nervous, stubborn, brilliant. Sometimes I wonder if they see me the way I once saw George, and if they do, I hope they never learn too quickly just how heavy it is to carry someone else's hope. But I'll carry it until it's time to pass the ring. When I locked the shed that evening, the air was colder, the sky quieter, but the lights in the lab still burned. Effie learns that true legacy isn't wealth or possessions, but the courage to build something meaningful despite abandonment and pain. Raised by her grandfather George, she discovers resilience through fixing broken things, hinges, heaters, and eventually her own path. His quiet guidance and the Thompson Circle Foundation teach her to create purpose from loss, offering others a place to belong as she once needed. Effie realizes that carrying hope for others, though heavy, is a choice to move forward not for closure or revenge, but to honor the enduring impact of those who stay.
I started at Thompson Digital Solutions as a junior analyst 3 years ago, the same year my brother Derek became VP of Sales. We both joined the company around the same time, though no one knew we were related at first. I kept my maiden name, Carter, while Derek used our family name, Thompson. Different last names meant different assumptions about who we were and how we'd gotten our positions. Derek loved telling people he'd earned his VP title through hard work and brilliant sales strategies. What he didn't mention was that our Uncle James owned 35% of the company and had made some calls on Derek's behalf. Derek was good at sales, certainly, but he'd had advantages he never acknowledged. Meanwhile, I worked my way up from junior analyst to senior analyst to team lead, all while completing my MBA at night. By my second year, I'd developed 3 proprietary analytics models that increased client retention by 41%. By my third year, I was managing a team of 12 and being courted by competing firms. That's when Eleanor Michaels, the CEO and founder of Thomson Digital Solutions, called me into her office. "Jenna," she said, gesturing to a chair. "I'm retiring in 8 months." I congratulated her, assuming she was about to tell me about leadership changes that would affect my department. "I want you to replace me," Eleanor continued. I stared at her. "I'm sorry, what?" "You're 29 years old, you've revolutionized our analytics division, and you understand this company better than anyone on the executive team. I've been watching you for 2 years. You're the person who should lead Thomson Digital into the next decade. What about the current executives?" I asked carefully. "The VP of Operations, the CFO, Derek Thompson, and sales." "They're competent managers," Eleanor interrupted. "You're a visionary. There's a difference. I'm not interested in leaving my company to someone who'll maintain the status quo. I want someone who'll push boundaries." Over the next 8 months, Eleanor mentored me privately. She taught me everything about CEO responsibilities, board relations, investor management, strategic planning, crisis leadership. We kept the succession plan confidential, known only to Eleanor, myself, and the board of directors. The board had been skeptical at first. I was young, relatively unknown outside my division, and didn't have the traditional executive pedigree. But Eleanor was persuasive and my track record spoke for itself. Eventually they agreed with conditions. I'd be CEO with full authority, but I'd have a 6-month probationary review to ensure I could handle the role. I accepted the terms. What made the situation more complicated was Derek. He'd been campaigning for a C-suite promotion for months, angling for chief revenue officer. He assumed Eleanor's retirement would create opportunities for the existing executive team to move up. He had no idea that the CEO position was already filled by his little sister. Eleanor and I decided to keep the announcement quiet until her official retirement date. I continued working in my director-level position, attending meetings, managing my team, while privately preparing to take over the entire company. Derek, meanwhile, became increasingly insufferable. It started small, dismissive comments during department meetings, casual put-downs disguised as jokes. Derek had always been competitive, but as his CRO ambitions grew, his need to elevate himself meant diminishing everyone around him. 3 months before Eleanor's retirement, we had a company-wide strategy meeting. Derek was presenting Q3 sales projections when I noticed an error in his market analysis. "Derek," I said during the Q&A portion, "your growth projections for the enterprise segment, they're based on last year's market conditions. The competitive landscape has shifted significantly. We should adjust those numbers down by at least 15%. Derek's smile was condescending. "Jenna, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but sales strategy is a bit more complex than running spreadsheets. These projections are based on actual pipeline conversations with real clients." "I understand," I replied calmly. "But the analytics data shows 3 major competitors have undercut our pricing in that segment. Unless we're planning to match their rates, those enterprise deals are less likely to close." "Stick to your cubicle," Derek said with a laugh. "Real business is for professionals who understand client relationships, not just people who analyze numbers in isolation." Several executives chuckled. Derek's ally, Marcus Hayes from operations, nodded in agreement. "Sales is an art form, Jenna. You can't reduce it to data points." I said nothing more, just made a note in my planner. Derek's projections would come up short in Q3, and when they did, I'd remember this moment. The incidents escalated over the following weeks. At a client dinner, Derek introduced me to a potential enterprise account as my sister who works in our analytics department. Not director of analytics, not head of our data intelligence division, just someone who works in analytics. When I tried to discuss the strategic implications of our pricing model, Derek cut me off. "Let's not bore our guests with technical details. Why don't you tell them about that restaurant you like downtown instead? At a leadership training session, Derek made a point of sitting at the executive table while gesturing for me to join the director-level attendees at a separate table. When I sat at the executive table anyway because I was leading a session on predictive analytics, he raised his eyebrows and whispered something to Marcus that made them both smirk. The worst moment came at the annual company retreat 6 weeks before Eleanor's retirement. The executive team was presenting the 5-year strategic vision. Each VP took turns discussing their division's role in the company's future. Derek spoke about expanding the sales team, opening new regional offices and pursuing Fortune 500 accounts. During the open forum discussion I raised my hand. Derek, you mentioned opening offices in Phoenix and Austin. Have we analyzed the cost-benefit ratio of physical expansion versus investing in remote sales capabilities? The data suggests we could reach the same markets at 40% lower overhead with a distributed team model. Derek sighed dramatically. Jenna, this is exactly why analysts shouldn't try to make strategic decisions. You're looking at costs without understanding the prestige and client relationship benefits of regional presence. Some things can't be measured in your spreadsheets. Actually, I replied, client satisfaction surveys indicate that enterprise buyers prioritize platform capabilities and support responsiveness over regional office presence. We could allocate those expansion funds toward product development and customer success teams instead. Leave business strategy to the smart ones, Derek said, his tone sharpening. You're great with numbers, really. But understanding market dynamics, client psychology, competitive positioning, that requires experience you don't have. The executives at his table nodded. Marcus added, Derek's right. Strategic thinking is different from tactical analysis. That's why we have distinct roles. I smiled politely. I understand. Just sharing the data. Derek leaned back in his chair, satisfied. And we appreciate the data. That's your job. Our job is deciding what to do with it. Eleanor, sitting at the back of the room, caught my eye. She gave me the smallest nod. 6 more weeks, her expression said. Just 6 more weeks. Eleanor's retirement announcement came on a Monday morning via company-wide email. After 15 incredible years building Thomson Digital Solutions, I'm retiring at the end of this month. It's been the honor of my career to work with such talented people. I'm confident the company is in excellent hands moving forward. The board will announce my successor this Friday. The office erupted into speculation. Derek spent the entire day networking, making calls, positioning himself as the obvious choice. I heard him on the phone with a board member. I know we discussed the CRO position, but given Eleanor's departure, I hope you'll consider me for SU. My sales leadership has been instrumental to our growth. By Wednesday, Derek was already acting like the job was his. He scheduled a meeting with the executive team to discuss transitional leadership strategies. He sent me an invitation with a note. You should attend, good learning opportunity for future director-level advancement. I attended the meeting and said nothing, just took notes while Derek outlined his vision for Thomson Digital's future. More aggressive sales targets, expanded executive bonuses, reduced investment in R&D. We need to focus on revenue generation, not experimental projects. Marcus asked about the analytics division. Will we be restructuring under new leadership? Definitely, Derek replied. Analytics is important, but it needs to serve sales strategy, not drive it. We'll be realigning reporting structures to ensure better integration with revenue-generating divisions. He glanced at me. Jenna, I hope you're open to changes. A new CEO will want to put their stamp on every department. I'm very open to changes, I replied calmly. Friday morning arrived. The board announcement was scheduled for 10 a.m., followed by an all-hands meeting at 11 a.m. At 9:45 a.m. I was sitting in my office when Derek knocked on my door. He was wearing his most expensive suit, practically glowing with confidence. Big day, he said. You coming to the announcement? Wouldn't miss it, I replied. I wanted to say, once I'm CEO, I hope there's no weirdness between us. I know I've been hard on you sometimes, but it's only because I see potential. Under my leadership, I think you could really grow into a senior director role. That's generous of you, I said carefully. Family is important, Derek continued. I'm not going to be one of those CEOs who forgets where he came from. I'll make sure you're taken care of. I appreciate that, I replied, my expression neutral. Derek checked his watch. I should get to the conference room. Board members are probably arriving. See you at the announcement. He left and I sat alone in my office for another 5 minutes, breathing deeply and centering myself for what was about to happen. The conference room was packed. All 150 employees had crammed in with overflow watching via video feed. The executive team sat in the front row. Derek right in the center, Marcus beside him, all of them radiating anticipation. I stood near the back, unnoticed. At exactly 10 a.m., Eleanor walked in with the board chair, Margaret Porter. Eleanor looked professional and composed, while Margaret carried a folder that presumably contained the official announcement. Thank you all for being here, Eleanor began. As you know, I'm retiring after 15 years of leading this incredible company. It's been the greatest privilege of my professional life. He paused, scanning the room. Choosing my successor was the most important decision I've ever made for Thomson Digital. I needed someone who understands not just where we are but where we need to go. Someone who combines analytical rigor with strategic vision. Someone who's proven they can innovate, lead teams and drive measurable results. Derek was sitting up straighter, ready to stand. I'm thrilled to announce, Eleanor continued, that our new CEO is Jenna Carter. The room went silent. Derek's smile froze on his face. Jenna has been with us for 3 years, Eleanor continued, during which she's transformed our analytics division, increased client retention by 41%, and developed proprietary models that have become core competitive advantages. For the past 8 months, she's been working with me and the board to prepare for this transition. I have complete confidence in her leadership. Margaret Porter stepped forward. The board of directors unanimously supports Jenna's appointment. Effective Monday, she'll assume full CEO responsibilities with complete authority over all company operations and personnel decisions. I walked to the front of the room. The crowd parted, people staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to confusion to, in some cases, respect. Eleanor shook my hand, then pulled me into a quick hug. You're ready for this, she whispered. I took her place at the podium. Thank you, Eleanor, and thank you to the board for this incredible opportunity. I know this announcement is surprising to many of you. Over the next few weeks, I'll be meeting with every department to discuss our strategic direction and answer questions. My office will be open and my commitment is to transparent, data-driven leadership that values every person in this company. I glanced at Derek. His face had gone from frozen to pale to red. Marcus was staring at me like I'd materialized from thin air. I'm excited about Thomson Digital's future, I continued. We have extraordinary talent, strong market positioning, and opportunities that I believe we haven't fully pursued. I'm looking forward to working with all of you to reach our potential. The applause started slowly, then built. Not everyone was enthusiastic. Several executives looked shell-shocked, but most employees seemed genuinely excited or at least intrigued. After the announcement, Eleanor left for a retirement lunch with the board. I stayed to take questions, fielding concerns about strategic direction, team stability, and transition timelines. Derek didn't ask any questions. He sat frozen in his seat until the room emptied, then stood and walked out without looking at me. The first executive team meeting under my leadership was scheduled for Monday at 9 a.m. Derek didn't attend. At 8:45 a.m., his assistant delivered his resignation letter. It was 2 sentences. I resign from Thomson Digital Solutions effective immediately. Best wishes for the company's future. Marcus Hayes, VP of Operations, attended but spent the entire meeting looking deeply uncomfortable. When I asked about Q4 operational priorities, he gave vague, non-committal answers. By Tuesday, Marcus had also resigned. 2 other executives, both Derek's close allies, gave notice by the end of the week. I accepted all the resignations graciously and began recruiting replacements. Eleanor had warned me this might happen. Some people can't handle working for someone they underestimated, she'd said. Let them leave. You'll build a better team. The real confrontation came 2 weeks later at a family dinner. My parents had invited both Derek and me, unaware of the full situation. They knew I'd become CEO and that Derek had resigned, but they didn't understand the context. Derek arrived late, his expression tight and angry. He barely acknowledged me. Over dinner, Mom asked excitedly about my new role. CEO at 29. We're so proud, Jenna. How are you finding it? It's challenging, I replied honestly. But I'm grateful for the opportunity. Derek set down his fork with a sharp clink. Can we talk about how this actually happened? Because I'm still trying to understand how my little sister, who spent 3 years as an analyst, suddenly became CEO of a company I've been busting my ass to build. Derek, Dad started. No, I want to know, Derek continued, staring at me. Did you sleep with someone on the board? Did you blackmail Eleanor? How does a junior analyst leapfrog over executives with decades of experience? I didn't leapfrog anyone, I replied calmly. Eleanor chose me based on my performance and potential. The board agreed. Your performance? Derek laughed bitterly. You ran spreadsheets. I generated $47 million in revenue last year. I built relationships with Fortune 500 accounts. I led a team of 30 sales professionals. Made charts. I developed 3 proprietary analytics models that increased client retention by 41%, I corrected. That retention translated to $23 million in recurring revenue. I also identified cost efficiencies that saved the company $8 million annually. And I led a team of 12 analysts who consistently delivered insights that improved decision-making across every department. Everyone can claim credit for results, Derek shot back. But real leadership is about being in the arena, making tough calls, managing complex relationships. Derek, I interrupted, my voice still calm but firm. I wasn't just making charts. I was building the systems that made your sales strategies possible. Every one of your tough calls was informed by data my team provided. Every client retention success you celebrated was supported by analytics we developed. You just never noticed because you were too busy dismissing me as the analyst in the cubicle. The table went quiet. Eleanor saw what I was capable of, I continued. She spent 8 months mentoring me, preparing me for this role. The board vetted me thoroughly. This wasn't a surprise promotion. It was a carefully planned succession. You didn't know about it because no one thought to tell you. Not because of some conspiracy, but because you weren't actually in consideration for the position. Derek's face was red. I was VP of sales. And you were good at it, I acknowledged. But being good at sales doesn't automatically qualify you to be CEO. Eleanor needed someone who understood the entire business, who could think strategically about technology, operations, client services, and market positioning. She needed someone who'd proven they could innovate, not just execute existing strategies. So you're saying I'm not strategic enough? Derek's voice was rising. I'm saying we have different strengths, I replied. You're excellent at client relationships and closing deals. I'm better at systems thinking and long-term planning. Eleanor chose the skill set she believed the company needed for its next phase. Mom tried to intervene. Maybe we should change the subject. She's 29, Derek said to our parents as if I wasn't there. 29 years old with 0 executive experience, and they made her CEO. Do you know how insane that is? Do you know how that looks to the industry? Thomson Digital Solutions is now being run by someone who can't even legally rent a car in some states. I'm 29, I agreed. I'm also more qualified than most 50-year-olds who've spent their careers coasting on outdated strategies and refusing to adapt. Age isn't competence, Derek. Results are. Results. Derek stood up abruptly. Let's see your results in 6 months when the company is hemorrhaging clients because no one takes a 29-year-old CEO seriously. The board has a 6-month review scheduled, I confirmed. I'm confident in the outcomes. Derek grabbed his coat. This is bullshit. Total bullshit. I'm out. He left, the front door slamming behind him. Dad sighed. Jenna, did you have to be so blunt? He asked. I replied simply. I told him the truth. I'm not going to apologize for earning a position I was qualified for just because it hurt Derek's ego. The 6 months that followed were intense. I restructured the executive team, hiring a new VP of sales with experience in consultative selling rather than Derek's aggressive transactional approach. I promoted 3 directors to VP positions, people who'd been overlooked under the previous leadership structure. I implemented the distributed sales model I'd proposed, closing the planned Phoenix and Austin offices before they opened and investing those funds in product development instead. The decision was controversial, but within 4 months, our enhanced platform features attracted 6 new enterprise clients that Derek's old team had marked as impossible gets. I reorganized the analytics division, expanding it from 12 people to 25 and integrating data intelligence across every department. Sales, operations, customer success, and product development all began making decisions based on real-time analytics rather than gut instinct. Revenue grew 29% in Q1 under my leadership. Client retention hit 94%, the highest in company history. Employee satisfaction scores jumped 31 points, particularly among non-executive staff who appreciated the more collaborative leadership style. The board's 6-month review was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in July. I prepared extensively, detailed reports, performance metrics, strategic plans for the next 3 years. I was confident but aware that some board members had been skeptical from the start. Margaret Porter opened the meeting. "Jenna, the board has reviewed your first 6 months as CEO. We've analyzed financial performance, client satisfaction data, employee feedback, and strategic execution." I waited, keeping my expression neutral. "Your performance has exceeded expectations," Margaret continued. "Revenue growth is strong, client retention is outstanding, and you've successfully navigated leadership transitions that could have destabilized the company. The board votes unanimously to remove the probationary status and confirm you as permanent CEO with full authority." I felt the tension release from my shoulders. "Thank you. I'm honored by your continued trust." "There is one additional matter," Margaret added. "We've received several communications from Derek Thompson. He's raised concerns about your management style, questioned your qualifications, and suggested that company performance is inflated or unsustainable." "I see," I replied carefully. "We want to be clear," Margaret continued, "that the board has full confidence in your leadership. Derek's communications appear to stem from personal grievance rather than legitimate corporate concerns. However, given his vocal criticism, we want to formalize your authority to make personnel and strategic decisions without interference or second-guessing from external parties, including former employees." She slid a document across the table. "This board resolution explicitly confirms your full authority to terminate any management position, restructure any department, and execute any strategy within approved budgets without requiring individual board approval for each decision. This is standard for established CEOs, but we want to put it in writing given the unusual circumstances of your succession." I read through the resolution carefully. It was comprehensive. Full executive authority, protected from board micromanagement, insulated from external criticism. "This is more than generous," I said. "You've earned it," Margaret replied. "Now go build the company we know you're capable of leading." The board's announcement went live that afternoon via company-wide email and press release. The board of directors of Thomson Digital Solutions is pleased to announce the successful completion of CEO Jenna Carter's 6-month performance review. Ms. Carter has demonstrated exceptional leadership, driving significant growth in revenue, client satisfaction, and operational efficiency. The board has voted unanimously to remove probationary status and confirm Ms. Carter as permanent CEO with full authority over all company operations and personnel decisions. I was in a meeting with the product development team when the announcement went out. My phone started buzzing immediately. Congratulations from employees, messages from industry contacts, LinkedIn notifications piling up. One message stood out. It was from Eleanor. "Told you that you were ready. Proud of you, Jenna. Enjoy this moment, you've earned it." I smiled and tucked my phone away, refocusing on the product roadmap discussion. There was work to do. Derek reached out 3 months later. It was a text message late on a Thursday evening. "Can we talk?" I called him the next morning during my commute. "Hey," Derek said, his voice subdued. "Thanks for calling back." "Of course. What's up?" I wanted to, I don't know, apologize maybe, or at least explain. He sighed. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since I left Thomson Digital. Started working with a career coach actually. Processing some stuff." "I'm listening," I said. "I was an asshole to you," Derek admitted. "The stuff I said in meetings, the way I dismissed your ideas, that dinner with Mom and Dad, all of it was out of line. I was so focused on my own career trajectory that I couldn't see what was actually happening. I thought I deserved the CEO position because I wanted it, not because I'd earned it." "I appreciate you saying that," I replied. "I saw the Q2 numbers," Derek continued. "Thomson Digital is doing incredibly well. Better than it ever did under Eleanor's final years, honestly. You were right about the distributed sales model, the analytics integration, all of it. I was wrong. We had different visions for the company, I said. That's not unusual. I'm sorry the transition was painful for you. It was my own fault, Derek said. I built my entire identity around being the successful one, the business genius, the future executive. When you got the CEO position, it shattered how I saw myself. That wasn't your problem, it was mine. We talked for another 20 minutes. Derek had taken a VP of sales position at a smaller firm, where he was learning to lead without the ego that had driven him at Thomson Digital. He was in therapy, working on his competitive tendencies and his need for external validation. Do you think we can be okay? Derek asked finally. As siblings, I mean. Not asking to come back to the company or anything. Just be family again. I'd like that, I said honestly. Good. Maybe we could do dinner sometime? Without the explosive arguments. I smiled. I think we can manage that. 2 years into my tenure as CEO, Thomson Digital Solutions had grown into something Eleanor hadn't imagined and Derek wouldn't have believed possible. Revenue had increased 67% from my first day. We'd acquired 2 smaller competitors, expanded into 3 new market verticals, and developed a platform that was being recognized as industry-leading. The distributed sales model had proven even more successful than projected. Without expensive regional offices, we'd invested in sales enablement technology and training that made every salesperson more effective. Our sales team was smaller than Derek's had been, but more productive per capita. The analytics division had become our crown jewel. We'd started licensing our proprietary models to other companies, creating an entirely new revenue stream that generated $12 million annually. I'd built an executive team that was collaborative, innovative, and aligned around a shared vision. No more ego battles, no more dismissive comments in meetings, no more leave it to the professionals gatekeeping. Most importantly, employee satisfaction was the highest it had ever been. People felt heard, valued, and empowered to contribute ideas regardless of their title or department. I was sitting in my office one evening, reviewing plans for our next board meeting when my assistant knocked. Sorry to interrupt, she said. But there's someone here to see you. Says he's your brother. Derek walked in looking nervous. Hey, I know I should have called first, but I was in the area and thought. It's fine, I said, gesturing to a chair. What brings you by? I'm actually here about a job, Derek admitted. Not for me, for one of my team members. She's exceptional and she's looking for a bigger opportunity. I immediately thought of Thomson Digital. Would you be willing to interview her? Of course, I replied. Have her send her resume to HR. I'm always looking for talent. Derek relaxed slightly. Thanks. He's really good. Reminds me of you actually. Analytical, strategic, doesn't accept conventional wisdom just because everyone else does. Sounds perfect for our culture, I said. Derek looked around my office. Eleanor's old office, now mine. The walls were covered with whiteboards filled with strategic planning notes. My desk had 3 monitors displaying real-time analytics dashboards. You really made this place yours, Derek observed. It's different from how Eleanor ran things. Different from how I would have run things. That was the point, I replied. Every leader brings their own approach. Your approach is working, Derek acknowledged. I saw you were named to the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. That's huge, Jenna. Seriously impressive. Thanks, I said. It's been a team effort. Derek stood up to leave, then hesitated. I'm proud of you, you know. I should have said that 2 years ago instead of being a jealous asshole. But I'm saying it now. You're an incredible CEO and you deserved this opportunity. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. I stood and hugged him. I appreciate that. And for what it's worth, you're doing great work at your company too. I've been following your progress. That enterprise deal you closed last month was brilliant. Derek smiled genuinely. Maybe we both just needed to find the right fit. Maybe we did, I agreed. 5 years after becoming CEO, I stood on a stage at the annual company retreat, addressing 400 employees, triple the size of when I'd started. Thomson Digital Solutions had gone public 6 months earlier. The IPO had valued the company at $1.2 billion, making it one of the most successful tech offerings of the year. Eleanor was in the audience, having returned to serve on our board of directors. Margaret Porter sat beside her. And in the back row, somewhat to my surprise, was Derek. He'd asked if he could attend as my guest, wanting to see what I'd built. 5 years ago, I told the crowd, I became CEO of this company under unusual circumstances. I was young, I was unexpected, and a lot of people doubted whether I was the right choice. Scattered laughter rippled through the audience. What I learned was that leadership isn't about age or traditional credentials or fitting people's expectations. It's about vision, execution, and surrounding yourself with people who are smarter than you in their areas of expertise. I clicked to the next slide, showing our growth trajectory. We've tripled in size, expanded into 6 new markets, developed products that are changing our industry, and built a culture where innovation comes from every level of the organization. None of that happened because of me alone. It happened because we created an environment where the best ideas win, regardless of who suggests them. The applause was thunderous. After the presentation, Derek found me at the reception. That was incredible, he said. This whole event, this company culture, it's nothing like what I remember. You really did transform everything. It took a lot of work, I admitted, and a lot of help from people who believed in the vision. Derek looked around at the celebrating employees. I keep thinking about that meeting where I told you to stick to your cubicle. God, I was such an idiot. You were protecting your ego, I replied. We all do it sometimes. The difference is you grew past it. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Eleanor had chosen me instead? Derek asked. If I'd gotten the CEO job I thought I deserved? I considered the question. Honestly, you probably would have been a perfectly competent CEO. You would have hit your numbers, managed the business efficiently, kept things stable. But I don't think you would have transformed anything. And transformation is what Eleanor knew this company needed. Derek nodded slowly. You're right. I was good at executing. You're good at reimagining. Those are different skills. Both valuable, I said. Just different contexts. Well, Derek raised his glass. To my little sister, the visionary CEO who proved everyone wrong. Including me. Especially me. I clinked my glass against his. To family who can admit when they're wrong and grow from it. We drank, and in that moment, I realized that the best victory wasn't proving Derek wrong or claiming the position he'd wanted. The best victory was building something meaningful while maintaining relationships with the people who mattered. Even the ones who doubted me. Eleanor had been right 5 years ago. I was ready to lead. And I'd proven it not by defeating Derek, but by becoming the leader the company actually needed. Patient, strategic, and focused on building something that would last long after any personal rivalry was forgotten.